far from great, and you could only hear him clearly when he talked directly into the microphone. But I could still tell that this person was a woman. Between her cries, I could hear her softly pleading. "Please," she begged, "stop it." I wasn't sure at first, again due to the scratchy audio, but it had sounded like the woman had an accent of some kind, and I couldn't tell you which, but I think you could understand why that would be relevant to mention. Before my head could fill itself with any more questions, Dusty himself began speaking to the mic with the same threatening, authoritative tone he had just ordered the woman in. "In this beautiful land we live in, filthy bastards like these wander in and taint the progress of the true Americans." His words were nothing different from anything else I've heard him say in previous shows, but hearing him say them in the current circumstances carried a sense of dread with it. I was more than a little unsettled at this point, and I was greatly reconsidering the option of leaving the broadcast. The chat box, which was usually flooding with heckling at the show's host, had noticeably decreased in activity. I imagined that everyone was most likely focusing directly on what was happening on the show right now. Dusty continued on, speaking more nonsense about a pure race and how it would cleanse the US of all who dared to taint it, and I can't fully recall everything he had said at that point, but I was more focused on the sounds of the woman crying. This went on for a few minutes with me listening attentively, hoping that everything was going to be okay and that this woman was not actually in any kind of danger. Suddenly, Dusty's rant came to an abrupt stop and was immediately followed by a loud clicking noise. The woman began screaming in reaction, her yells gaining an echo as she ran far from wherever the microphone was placed. Her pleading words from earlier were now intensified and incredibly desperate, now loud enough to be picked up by the mic at a distance. "Please don't do this, just stop." That was when it hit me. I couldn't tell at first due to the previously mentioned audio quality issues, but the clicking noise must have been the cocking of a gun. Dusty was going to shoot this woman. My mind did not want to fully accept this belief that this woman was in serious danger, but there wasn't a way to deny it now. This couldn't have been a prank. The woman's cries for help sounded too real, and I was now convinced that Dusty had forced this woman into the location of wherever it was that he hosted this show from and planned to shoot her. I had completely frozen up. What the hell was I supposed to do? It wasn't as if I could pick up the phone and call the cops. This was a radio show on the internet. There was no way they'd be able to do anything, at least not immediately anyways. Panic began to overwhelm me as I struggled to think of anything I could do. The woman's begging had suddenly grown louder. It was hard to overhear her shouting, but Dusty also began to say something. The way his voice was muffled indicated that he had his back to the mic. Dusty then started spouting, "You've ruined our land. You are the disease and I am the cure." Unable to do anything else, the woman once again pleaded with the attacker. "You don't have to do this," the woman shouted. "I won't tell anyone. Please, just let me." And that's when it was all over. Loud bang and complete silence. All of the noise ceased, and the only sound I could hear was the rapid beating of my heart. The loud bang had sent a jolt through the body. Once again, I was frozen in place, not knowing what to do, and then my brain finally finished processing everything I had just heard. Dusty had just killed that woman. Upon the realization, my mind began to panic, and I started to try and convince myself this was all just some bad dream or an elaborate ruse. All the while, hearing nothing but the static buzzing of the broadcast through my headphones, with no sound coming from the gunman, I shook my head, desperately trying to remove the gruesome image of the woman's dead body from mind. Several more minutes of silence passed. I don't know why I didn't just close the browser immediately. I just sat there listening, unable to do anything else. I don't know how long this continued for, but eventually some of my senses began to return to me, and I moved the mouse towards the red X in the top right. But then something stopped me. In a tone that sounded as if he were grinning, Dusty spoke into the microphone one last time. "They snuck into our country by the waves of the ocean. I'll make sure they go back the same way, one piece at a time." After hearing all that, having my senses returned, I clicked and closed the browser. Well, that was Rusty's radio show, a racist broadcast by some random guy living who knows where in the United States. Like the last one, this actually personally hits me. I stream as well, and knowing how prevalent it is for anybody to do, having a current-gen console, using a web application, or just use use streaming software such as OBS, anyone can stream with relative ease. And I'm talking about video streams. Audio streams, well, those are even easier. Many platforms exist, and you can set up your own stream in minutes, And if you really want, you can go towards your own webpage and streaming protocols if you really want it, and in that case, then you don't have to deal with anybody's rules and regulations, and you can broadcast whatever you want on your own. So now that we got the fact that this stuff is relatively easy to do, let's get on to the meat of the story. It sounds ordinary, and that's what actually makes it really good. Shows like Dusty's exist everywhere on the internet. Tons of people make shocking shows like this, and that's alright. That's just the power of the internet, say what you want, and that's about it. But it's like when we talk about serial killers in a way. You know, how many active there are in the world. This is sort of the same situation. There are many streams out there. Let's take, for example, Twitch or an audio streaming service. 10% of those streams have that's where most of the population really is. Then the 90% of those streams is where, there's a few people, there's none at all, there's like 10, 20, 30, 50, and that's about it. There are many of those streams, and there are so many of those that go by unheard of, unnoticed, and that's about it. Dusty's stream would be something like that as well. Sure, it might be a little shocking, and sure, it will be full of material that may bait a few people into it, but it probably is one of those streams that isn't going to get very far off. A lot of people, even those people that like to troll certain streams, especially whenever they may have those call-in segments, they're still not as populated as some would like to think. So shows like Dusty's can exist. Now, if somebody can go about killing people on a live stream, that's where things get a little janky. Again, 90% of those streams where there's not a lot of people, who really knows which one of those streams contains matter like this? Especially if it's hosted on a server or a website that is run by the actual person streaming. That way, you have even less exposure in dealing with it. You can stream whatever you want at that point. Nobody cares. You can even go through ways to mask your identity or your protocols out there, so it's a little harder to trace, but we're going into a whole lot of technical stuff that we really don't need to for this creepypasta analysis. Regardless, the point being is that stuff like this exists, and the fact that it's actually given out so ordinarily makes it even more creepier. Anybody on the internet can broadcast the killing of somebody else. That can happen. And it's a very, very, very weird thing to happen, very scary thing, but it is something that can happen. A show like Dusty's, this event could occur, and by some stroke of luck, well, honestly, it can fly right by, and very few people might hear of it. Sure, nowadays, with how social media heavy that everyone is, stuff like this would have been shared around like crazy, but regardless, even if that was the case, it still would have happened. And that's what makes this creepypasta really, really hit me hard, because it's something that can really happen. It's not a joke. It's no bullshit. It can actually really happen. And the fact is, even now, as you may be watching this, it could happen on a stream somewhere else, and that's what really gives it the spooks. That being said, though, that's all I can really say about Dusty's radio show, seemingly harmless shock radio show turned into a red room broadcast is all I can really say. That being said, this has been another episode of Creepypastas, part of Haunted Gaming. Let me know what you thought about this creepypasta in the comment section below. What would you change to make it better as well? Please let me know. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. This is me, Mudahar, and I am